Thank you, Deputy Speaker. My question is to the Assistant Treasurer and Minister assisting for deregulation. I'm really concerned that the New South Wales Government budget funding cuts are hurting every school in my electorate. Why is it important that governments manage their fiscal duties in a responsible way that helps families, children and local communities?
The Assistant Treasurer has the call.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I thank the member for Parramatta for her question. This government understands the importance of managing the budget for all Australians, and that's why we're taking responsible savings in order to return the budget to surplus this year. But because we're a Labor government, we're determined to manage the economy responsibly in a way that doesn't leave people behind. And in fact, we are providing more support for families and communities than ever before. And we're determined to make sure we have a strong economy, but we want to build a fairer society as well. That's why we've introduced the school kids bonus. That's why we've increased family payments, and that's why we've delivered $47 billion worth of tax cuts in the term of this government. But hard-working families and communities are facing an unprecedented threat, and it's coming from state Liberal premiers. Yesterday we saw the New South Wales Liberal government announce funding cuts of $1.7 billion to education. These are the biggest, the most vicious, the most aggressive cuts to education funding in New South Wales in the last 20 years. And guess what? That's when they were last in government. That's when the Liberals were last in government, when the most vicious cuts prior to this were inflicted. The member for Parramatta, she knows, representing a part of the world that I also represent in Western Sydney, just how much of an impact these cuts are going to have for the people of Western Sydney. But it's not just her and I that feel this way. There is another member for Parramatta. He's the Liberal member for Parramatta in New South Wales. And he was quoted in the Telegraph today saying about these education funding cuts, he said, "These are our people in Western Sydney, the aspiring, and these are the ones we should be supporting, not cutting them down, not cutting them down." Well, it's Labor governments that invest in the skills of people like the people of Western Sydney. It's the Liberals that are out there cutting them down. And we can guarantee that they'll do it again. And if this mob ever get into government, they'll do the same thing. And how do we know that? We know that because they've got a $70 billion black hole. And if they can do this sort of damage in New South Wales with $1.7 billion worth of cuts, imagine how much damage they can do to the country if they have to rip out the amount of cuts involved to fill their $70 billion black hole. But we already know that they have already announced $2.8 billion worth of cuts to education. But it's not the cuts that they've announced that you've got to worry about. It's the ones that they haven't announced yet. The Leader of the Opposition, straight out of the Campbell-Newman playbook, he's going to establish, one of the first things he'll do is establish a Commission of Audit. The Commission of Audit will be all about making sure that they get to inflict the cuts that they haven't had the opportunity to take to the Australian people before the election.
The member for Parramatta on a supplementary.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The Minister has talked about the impact of government fiscal policies on education. What does this mean for schools in my electorate?
The Minister has the call.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I know that the member for Parramatta cares very deeply about all of the schools in her electorate, and she's right to ask the question, because the impact of these cuts will be devastating. It will be devastating, and it will hit every single school in her electorate. Every government school, every Catholic school and every independent school. No school will be safe from the ravages of these vicious cuts that we're seeing in New South Wales. And how do we know? How do we know exactly what the consequences of these sorts of cuts might be? Well, on Friday there was a letter circulated to principals in the Parramatta Diocese by the Executive Director of Catholic Education, Mr Gregory Whitby, who I also had the opportunity to speak to today. And in his letter, he spoke about what the impact of these cuts might be. He said that this decision will have a profound impact on costs for Catholic schooling. Fees will have to rise, and other measures like school closures and staff reduction may be necessary. So if you want to know what the impact of these funding cuts is going to be, if you want to know about the impact of what the funding cuts that a future Liberal federal government would inflict if they get the opportunity, it's about jacking up fees for parents, it's about cutting funding for schools, and it's about, in some cases, even leading to school closures.